Well, first of all, I really want to thank you for the invitation. I'm actually honored to come here and speak to you because I'm probably the only non-academic in the field, and I feel a little bit shy or maybe humble, or maybe at least it will be a little bit of a different type of lecture that I will present. Because I don't have a precise thesis, as maybe a scientist could have or should have. I'm a novelist and an author. I published 3 novels before, and then this is my first nonfiction book, so it is actually my first larger academic work, but still written in a, let's say, popular not novelistic style, but certainly I was not trying to write a scientific research paper, but I was trying to incorporate my research that I've done over 5 years in concerning the drug abuse in Nazi Germany in a somewhat literary form. So I'm also very happy to be in this very special building where Baudelaire apparently tried to sleep, or actually slept. His bedroom was up here, but we don't know if he really slept over a couple of years, because he was also, I guess his brain was also not sober often. I mean, his writings about certain drugs, such as hashish, are quite known. Even though hashish I will not talk about today, because I think this is the only drug that the Nazis did not utilize, because it just makes you maybe too mellow. They should have, maybe. So I am going to talk about a very different drug than hashish. I'm going to talk mainly about methamphetamine. Methamphetamine is a very strong stimulant, and it was actually turned into a product in the so-called Third Reich. It was patented by a company called Temmler on October 31st, 1937, and quickly became a big hit in Nazi Germany in 1938. And then at one point also became interesting to the German army and to the war effort, because they realized that with methamphetamine, soldiers might have certain advantages. I want to start my lecture because I wrote most of the book in the high Alps in Switzerland, in the Nietzsche house in Sils Maria, where Nietzsche wrote most of his work. And Nietzsche says once the book is out, the writer should just read from the book, and he shouldn't talk about the book. So a little bit I believe in that, or at least I want to give you a sense of the book. So I'm going to read the first 2 pages, so you get an introduction into the book. Methamphetamine, the Volksdroge. National Socialism was toxic in the truest sense of the word. It gave the world a chemical legacy that still affects us today, a poison that refuses to disappear. On one hand, the Nazis presented themselves as clean-cut and enforced a strict, ideologically underpinned anti-drug policy with propagandistic pomp and draconian punishments. In spite of this, a particularly potent and perfidious substance became a popular product under Hitler. This drug carved out a great career for itself all over the German Reich and later in the occupied countries of Europe. Also in France, for example, when Germany occupied France, pervitin made its way into France and actually stayed there for a while, and was on a different brand name, still available in France, I think up until the 80s. Under the trademark pervitin, this little pill became the accepted Volksdroge, or people's drug, and was on sale in every chemist's shop. It wasn't until 1939 that its use was restricted by making pervitin prescription only, and the pill was not subjected to regulation until the Reich Opium Law in 1941. Its active ingredient, methamphetamine, is now either illegal or strictly regulated, but With the number of consumers currently at over 100 million and rising, it counts today as our most popular poison. Produced in hidden labs by chemical amateurs, usually in adulterated form, this substance has come to be known as crystal meth. Usually ingested nasally in high doses, the crystalline form of this so-called horror drug, that's what the media labels it often, has gained unimaginable popularity all over Europe, with an exponential number of first-time users. This upper, with its dangerously powerful kick, is used as a party drug for boosting performance in the workplace, in offices, even in parliaments and at universities. There was a famous case in Germany last year when a leading politician of the Green Party, Beck, was arrested by the police carrying quite a bit of methamphetamine. And then the German main tabloid, the Bild, titled, "Green Politician Caught with Hitler's Drug," which was, I think, referring to my book, because just before the book had come out in Germany, and there was a lot of discussion about Hitler's drug. Even though Hitler himself never took methamphetamine, but we'll come to that maybe later on. This upper banishes both sleep and hunger while promising euphoria, but in the form of crystal meth, it is a potentially destructive and highly addictive substance. Hardly anyone knows about its rise in Nazi Germany. Here we can see the factory where methamphetamine was developed. It's the Temmler factory in Berlin. I don't know how the pointer works, but I can just show you this. This little house used to be the whole of the factory before they became so successful with methamphetamine. So you can see that it was really a very successful product. Today the factory looks like this. It's just a ruin because it was bombed, and Temmler actually removed its production first to West Germany, and it's still actually in West Germany. It's a global pharmaceutical player today. When I spoke to them, they were very reluctant to discuss with me the origins of their success. When I worked on this book, I worked very closely with the German historian Hans Mommsen, who is he died last year, but he was a leading German historian on National Socialism, and he advised me actually to look where drugs come from in Germany. Why do they play such a big role? And we can see that most illegal drugs we know today, addictive drugs, were once successful German products. For example, heroin was a product by the Bayer company. The German company Merck had the patent for cocaine at one point, was marketing the best cocaine in the world. Actually, the chemist who invented the maybe first designer drug, heroin, invented another painkiller within the span of 10 days, and that was aspirin. So the same chemist, Hoffmann, found these two substances within the span of 10 days. So there was in the 19th century, in the late 19th century, a boom in the pharmaceutical industry in Germany, coming up with new drugs, and so it is no surprise that then in 36, 37, Temmler actually develops the most potent stimulant that has ever been developed, I suppose. I don't think there is a stronger one, but I mean we have later talks by other experts that could maybe have more information than I have. But basically, methamphetamine is the strongest stimulant. And when it became very popular in '38 in Berlin, for example, there was even a chocolate laced with methamphetamine on the market. Here's an original ad. The slogan is Hildebrand, chocolates always a delight, and one portion contained 13 milligrams of pure methamphetamine, which is quite a high dose, and the recommendation was to take between 3 and 9 of those that would not be dangerous. It actually would be less dangerous than drinking coffee. So we can see that in 38 in Germany, the dangers of, or the effects of methamphetamine really were not well researched. I was quite surprised when I studied studies that had been done by German universities, because a lot of universities then did studies on methamphetamine, and they basically all found only positive effects. And it's interesting to see that apparently the scientists had been influenced by pervitin themselves, because it was usual to test it on yourself at the time. I don't know how it is today, but apparently in the beginning of your pervitin time, you actually quite like it, and you think this is beneficial, because I'm going to read a small excerpt about the actual effects, what happens in the brain when you take pervitin. Adding again that this is not an academic book, so maybe brain experts here might word it a little bit differently. The molecular structure of this of methamphetamine is similar to adrenaline, and so it passes easily through the blood and into the brain. Unlike adrenaline, however, methamphetamine does not cause sudden rises in blood pressure, but works more gently and lasts longer. The effect occurs because the drug tickles out the messenger substances dopamine and noradrenaline from the nerve cells of the brain and pours them into synaptic gaps. This puts the brain cells in excited communication with each other, and a kind of chain reaction takes place. A neuronal firework explodes, and a biochemical machine gun starts firing an uninterrupted sequence of thoughts. All of a sudden, the consumer feels wide awake and experiences an increase in energy. The senses are intensified to the extreme. One feels livelier, energized to the tip of one's hair and fingers. Self-confidence rises. There's a subjectively perceived acceleration of thought processes, a sense of euphoria, and a feeling of lightness and freshness. A state of emergency is experienced, as when one faces a sudden danger, a time when an organism mobilizes all its forces, even if there is no danger. An artificial kick. Methamphetamine does not only pour neurotransmitters into the gaps, but also blocks their reabsorption. For this reason, the effects are long-lasting, often more than 12 hours, a length of time which can damage the nerve cells at higher doses as the intracellular energy supply is drawn into sympathy. The neurons run hot and brain chatter can't be turned off. Nerve cells give up and die off irrevocably. This can lead to a deterioration in the ability to find words, in attention and concentration, and a general depletion in the brain where memory, emotions, and the reward system are concerned. The lack of stimulation, once the effect fades away, is a sign of empty hormone stores which have to fill up again over the course of several weeks. In the meantime, fewer neurotransmitters are available. The consequences can include a lack of drive, depression, joylessness, and cognitive disturbances. Although such possible side effects have been investigated by now, further in-depth research was put on the back burner at the time because the Temla company were over-eager, bursting with pride over their new product. The company smelled a roaring trade and contacted one of the most successful PR agencies in Berlin to commission an advertisement campaign, the like of which Germany had never seen. Their publicity model was the marketing strategy for another rather stimulating product produced by none other than the Coca-Cola company, which, with the catchy slogan "Ice Cold," had enjoyed enormous success with their brown brew. In the first weeks and months of 1938, when pervitin was beginning to go from strength to strength, posters appeared on advertising pillars, the outside of trams, and on the buses and local and underground trains of Berlin. In a modern, minimalist style, they mentioned only the trademark and referred to its medical indications: weakness of circulation, low energy, depression. It also showed the orange and blue Pervitin tube, the characteristic packaging with curved lettering. At the same time, another trick by this branch of business, all the doctors in Berlin received a letter from Temmler saying bluntly that the company's aim was to persuade the doctors personally. What people like themselves, they also like to recommend to others. The envelope included free pills containing 3 milligrams of active ingredient, as well as a frank postcard to be returned. Quote, "Dear doctor, your experiences with Pervitin, even if they were less than favorable, are valuable to us in helping to limit the field of indication. So we would be very grateful to you for a message on this card." So we can see that also the company wasn't really sure what it's good for, and their idea was that it's basically good for everything. It was supposed to be a new type of medicine that is not designed to cure a specific disease, but to, as I said, basically be good for everything. It was a performance enhancer, a new type of medicine, and it took quite a while till negative side effects became known. And there was a strong hunger in Germany at the time for this buzzy substance, because in 1938, the German economy was booming. I recently read a report by the French Ministry of Economy at the time saying our workers have to work more in order to be able to compete with competing countries, which obviously meant Germany, because apparently in Germany the production was very high, and people were using this Pervitin in order to be able to stay in the game, basically stay in the rat race that was Nazi Germany, which was also obviously a modern performance society, where everyone that was accepted as part of the Volkskörper, the people, was trying its best to perform as best as possible. Pervitin became a sensation, one psychologist reported. It soon gained acceptance in a very wide range of circles. Students used it as a survival strategy for the exertions of exams. Telephone switchboard operators and nurses swallowed it to get through the night shift, and people doing difficult physical or mental labor used it to improve their performance, quote, end. Whether it was secretaries typing faster, actors refreshing themselves before their shows, writers using the stimulation of methamphetamine for all-nighters at the desk, or hopped-up workers on conveyor belts in the big factories raising their output, Pervitin spread among all social circles. Furniture packers packed more furniture, firemen put out fires faster, barbers cut hair more quickly, night watchmen stopped sleeping on the job, train drivers drove their trains without a word of complaint, and long-distance lorry drivers bombed down freshly constructed autobahns, completing their trips in record time. Post-lunchtime naps became a thing of the past. Doctors treated themselves with it. Businessmen who had to rush from meeting to meeting pepped themselves up. Party members did the same, and so did the SS. Stress declined, sexual appetite increased, and motivation was artificially enhanced. A doctor wrote, quote, "Experimenting on myself, I also observed that both physically and mentally one may receive a pleasant boost in energy, which for 6 months has allowed me to recommend Pervitin to manual and clerical workers, fellow colleagues who are temporarily short of time, and also speakers, singers with stage fright, and examination candidates. One lady likes to use the medication 2 times 2 tablets a day, especially before parties. Another successfully on particularly demanding working days, up to 3 times 2 tablets daily. 1 tablet at the time contained 3 milligrams of methamphetamine. Pervitin became a symptom of the developing performance society. So then it is, in a way, not a big surprise that the German army gets wind of this. This happens through a professor in Berlin. His name is Otto Ranke. He's the head of the military medical academy in Berlin, where all the medical doctors of the Wehrmacht, the German army, were being trained. Professor Ranke was working there, and he was heading the the Institute for Defense Physiology. And basically, he was responsible for performance enhancement of the army. So if the army was deciding between white bread and full grain bread, it would go over his desk and he would make tests and try to figure out which is actually better for a soldier. And he realized that pervitin is such a big fad in the society, and the first university studies that he read talked about a decrease in anxiety and fear, and a decrease in inhibitions, and also a decrease in the need to sleep. And when he read that, he became extremely interested, because his number one enemy basically was sleep, because a tired soldier is not a good soldier. And so far there had been no remedy against this problem that people just after 12 hours of fighting, they have to rest. And that period of rest can be crucial in battle. So he thought maybe with pervitin we can beat Morpheus. We can tell the god of sleep to go somewhere else and leave Germany altogether. And he did these tests, for which we have these slides here. You see here May 3rd, 1939. He started these tests at 8 p.m. This photo was taken by him at 4 in the morning. And he gave the people, the young medical officers, either caffeine, which is C, benzedrine, which is an American product, and amphetamine, which is B. S is Scheintablette, placebo, and then P is obviously pervitin. Oops, this is the lady. And here already he states that at 4 in the morning, the placebo people obviously are tired. Where is the pointer? Okay, here you see an S person. He's sleeping at 4. Well, here the pervitin guy is chatting away with the benzedrine guy, and the caffeine guy is already a little bit lame. And I mean, they had to fill out questionnaires from 8 in the evening till I think it was 2 in the afternoon, so over a very long period of time. And then he obviously looked at the results, and here he writes the S people are trying everything they can in order to stay awake. Well, here the pervitin guy is really relaxed, kind of reading his tests, and this placebo guy really seems to have a problem. Like he opens his eyes wide to stay awake. Well, here you wouldn't see this from a pervitin person. And Ranke came to the conclusion that he came to the proof that pervitin actually does reduce the need to sleep, and became very excited about this. Wrote to his superior, the Heeressanitätsinspekteur, was the highest medical officer of the German army, and said we should supply pervitin in an orderly fashion to the troops, because this was in the summer of 1939, shortly before Germany invaded Poland, which started World War II. But his superiors didn't reply to Ranke's suggestion. Apparently they had different problems at the time, or they did not really understand that it might be of importance. And then Ranke wrote to the medical officers in the field in occupied Poland, asked them to write back to him whether pervitin was used in the attack on Poland, because it was so known at the time that he thought that many soldiers knew about it and had already carried it with them to the front. There's one famous example of Heinrich Böll, who later won the Nobel Prize for Literature, who has these letters that they're published as in a book called Letters from the War. He's writing to his parents quite often requesting pervitin because his medical officer has run out of it because the army hasn't officially stocked it. So there are numerous letters of Heinrich Böll writing to his parents, please send me more pervitin. I have to be on guard tonight. I can't stand this, the duty without the magic powers of pervitin. So he's just one example of many, and in the military archive in Freiburg, all these letters that came back to Ranke from the front in Poland are stored, and this is a typical letter from the 8th Tank Division, who's writing back to him about pervitin, saying that the experiences are very favorable. One tablet keeps fatigue away from drivers. Soldiers felt fresh when they took it, and only if you take more than 2 tablets, there are feelings of overdosing, which then, of course, becomes interesting. Here, this medical doctor writes about heart racing. So there's already a sense in the air that there are also side effects. But Ranke especially reads about the positive effects, because there are really many letters coming back to him, and most of them just praise pervitin, how good it was doing the work, as it's mostly called in these letters, which was killing people or invading Poland and basically laying the groundstone for the atrocities that Germany committed later on in World War II. But Ranke collects basically all the positive data and writes again to his superior before the next attack, which is, of course, the attack that started on May 10th, 1940 against Luxembourg, Belgium, Holland, and, of course, France. And this time, in the preparations for this second Blitzkrieg, which in German means basically speed war, his superiors react differently, and they say, yes, we should use pervitin for this next campaign. And this here is the so-called stimulant decree that is issued on April 17th, 1940. It's the first document, I believe, in military history which orders a whole army to take a very potent, in this case, synthetic drug. It regulates specifically how much you should take, in what intervals it should be taken, what are the effects, what are the negative side effects. One of the negative side effects that is listed here is aggressive behavior, which I guess was a kind of joke maybe, or at least maybe an incentive for medical officers to give out even more, because that's exactly what you need when you invade a country, is aggressive behavior. This was issued on April 17th, 1940, to all the medical officers of the German army and also to the medical officers of the SS, informing them exactly how to dish out methamphetamine once the attack starts. And between that decree and May 10th, when the attack actually started, several million dosages of methamphetamine, 35 million dosages, in fact, in total, were being distributed to the German troops. And I tried to find out how exactly they were distributed, and it's quite interesting because Ranke went to the front and examined also how it was distributed and which troop parts used the most methamphetamine. And it's basically no surprise that the German tank troops used the highest amount of methamphetamine. And this was actually the first campaign in military history. Obviously, there hasn't been so many with tanks, but before that, tanks were being used in a way as a backup weapon. This German advance the tactic was different. It was to use the tanks as the avant-garde of the push of the. So you have these methed up tank generals and tank people, tank drivers who kind of leading the advance deep into France within a short period of time, completely surprising the French and the British armies, which were expecting the attack to happen in the north of Belgium, and also the French troops were down in the Maginot Line. The Germans went through the Ardennes Mountains. The goal was to go through the mountainous terrain in 3 days and 3 nights without stopping. And this was considered impossible by the Allied defense strategies. They said they just didn't calculate that this could happen. And when they realized the Germans are actually going through the Ardennes Mountains, Churchill said to, I think it was Daladier here in Paris, don't worry that they were so fast on the first day. They will have to rest at night, and they sit in the mountains, and we can come down and destroy them. In fact, the Germans did not rest at night because they were using a substance that just did not allow them to sleep. If you take 2-3 pills of pure methamphetamine, it's absolutely impossible to sleep, at least for the first couple of days. And the big trick of this campaign was that it was won in such a short period of time that it was already over after a very limited number of days. And this is what I'm going quite into detail in Blitz, trying to describe which troop parts are taking how much and how are they moving, and how are battles being fought very differently than before. French and British defenders were very surprised by the erratic movement patterns of the German troops, which were completely different than everything that was written in the basically in the books how it would work. So there comes the saying that French and British at that point were still fighting a First World War, while the Germans were already actually fighting World War II, and with a very different mindset, which was certainly enhanced by the massive use of methamphetamine. Here's just a photo where we see that also. This name is Ernst Udet. He was a very high-ranking Luftwaffe officer, and he was so keen on methamphetamine that he supposedly took up to 7 pills for breakfast. And he was one of the first victims also of Pervitin, because he developed, well, obviously a dependency on the drug, and also psychosis, and he shot himself in the head in the fall of 1940, having taken these famous 7 pills for breakfast. Obviously, this was portrayed very differently in Nazi propaganda. They said he died while testing a new plane, and he had a big state funeral. And Goering said he was one of the greatest heroes of the German people. Basically, he was a totally overworked officer who just made. Well, Hitler later said no one made more mistakes than Udet, which I think is wrong, because I think no one made more mistakes than Hitler, obviously, even as a military strategist. But this is a different chapter. I'm also examining quite intensely the drug abuse by Hitler himself. But let's stay with methamphetamine for a second. Here we have a letter that was written by the Reichsstelle Chemie. It went over the desk of Goering. It was a letter to Temmler acknowledging here on May 7th, 1941, that Pervitin is being considered as kriegsentscheidend, which means decisive for the war. So Temmler always wanted to know how did it actually work, and the army said, yeah, well, we can't really disclose this. So this is the first document where the army responds to Temmler and says that their product is now being classified as decisive for the war, which means that the Temmler company would receive all the necessary raw materials that they needed for the production of methamphetamine all the way till the end of the war, because the methamphetamine plague in the German army, once it started, it never stopped. And the successful application of the Blitzkrieg against Poland and France kind of led to belief, or just led to dependency also. The soldiers were being used to it. And then also in the long war that followed, for example, against the Soviet Union, hundreds of millions of tablets of methamphetamine were being dished out to the soldiers. And I spoke to one medical officer who's still alive now, who told me that he still gave it out in Stalingrad, just gave Pervitin to people so they would have another another boost for a couple of hours. I mean, also Pervitin reduces your hunger, so it was actually good in Stalingrad because people had no food. So, but he said it didn't work anymore. He said it was very different. Applying Pervitin to his soldiers in the Blitzkrieg, where you just had to be awake for like a week and then you could rest because the campaign was over. And then in the war against Russia, which was a very long affair, obviously, it just depleted soldiers. They became dependent. The tolerance was building up. They needed more and more. They became depressed if they didn't have it. Certainly we can see here that methamphetamine is not the wonderful substance as the Temmler company wanted to have it in 1938 and 39. So maybe I want to briefly get into the third part of Blitzed, which talks about Hitler. Hitler obviously was shown to the German people and I guess to the population all over the world as a teetotaler, as the British word goes, someone who is a very clean-cut person, no alcohol, wouldn't even drink coffee, obviously no drugs. I mean, this was, in a way, an important part of the so-called Führer cult, to portray this person as this abstinent kind of health freak or saint that only lives for his people. When I studied the notes of his personal physician, Theo Morell, which are stored in the Federal Archives of Germany in Koblenz, and also in the National Archives of the United States in Washington, a very different picture actually emerged. And there had been reports on Morell before that Hitler had this kind of crazy doctor who gave him weird things, but I actually looked at what these weird things were, and it's quite interesting because you can actually see a whole drug career, or a drug, I don't know if career is the right word, but a drug path kind of forming for Hitler. And this started in 1936 when he first met Morell, and Morell, I think we also have a picture of him. This on the right here is Morell. Everyone hated him. Hitler loved him. He was a celebrity doctor in Berlin in 1936. And then he met Hitler through a common friend, and he cured him with a probiotic from his stomach problems. And he was a vitamin pioneer, injecting high dosages of vitamins into the bloodstream of Hitler every day. So Hitler, whenever he had to give a speech or whenever it was cold and he had to stand outside in front of his troops or people, he was always getting vitamin shots. And maybe you could call this harmless. Maybe it is even harmless. And Hitler said, this is actually putting my healthy diet onto a scientific level. That's how he put it. But in 1941, there's a change happening. Hitler has the Russian flu during the campaign against Russia, precisely at the moment where The strategy is being decided whether the Germans will advance on Moscow, whether the German army will split up and half of them will go north to Leningrad and the rest will go south towards the Ukraine and then the oil fields in the south. And Hitler had the Russian flu, the Ruhr, that's the name in German of this. It's kind of a very strong flu, and he couldn't go to the military briefing, and he asks, and you can read all of this in Morell's notes, it's very detailed descriptions of days and moods and situations. He requests something stronger than vitamins from Morell, and he gets an opiate for the first time combined with a hormone injection, a kind of steroid, and it immediately makes Hitler able to go to the meeting, and he believes that this actually might help him again and again. And they formed a word which is Sofortherstellung in German, which means instant recovery. So Hitler, whenever he had something, he demanded from Morell, I want my instant recovery. And vitamins at one point were obviously not strong enough anymore for this instant recovery. So we can see that from 41 to 43 is kind of the second phase of Hitler's, second drug phase of Hitler, where he takes quite a bit of steroids and hormone products, quite dubious things, liver extracts from pigs, bull testicle capsules, all kinds of, I guess, potent hormones that somehow do something in the organism and maybe boost you, these cocktails certainly are dangerous also, that they might actually destabilize your health. And in 43, I'm just summarizing it briefly because we're running out of time, he receives a new medication for the first time before a very decisive meeting with Mussolini. This is on July 18th, 1943. Mussolini apparently wants to leave the Axis, wants to stop the war for Italy. Those are the rumors. Hitler is very nervous before the meeting, doesn't want to take the meeting. This is in the Villa Feltre in northern Italy. And wants to cancel, says his stomach cramps are too bad, he can't go. And Morell gives him for the first time Eukodal, which is a German brand name, a Merck company product containing containing oxycodone, which is still a very popular product in the United States. But Hitler was getting it injected intravenously in a very high dosage, and in that form of application, it creates euphoria. And there are several reports of this meeting with Mussolini, basically by somewhat embarrassed spectators of that meeting, saying that Hitler was talking nonstop for 3 hours without stopping, and Mussolini just sat there on his chair sweating and not being able to even like utter one word of maybe suggesting a different strategy or something like that. And we can actually see this in Morell's notes that from 43 all the way to the end of 1944, before decisive meetings with his generals, especially talking about the situation on the Eastern Front, where his generals, who are not crazy, but who are rational thinking, maybe criminals, maybe war criminals, but still rational thinking Prussian generals usually, that would try to explain to him that maybe strategies would have to be changed, or basically giving him the real situation on the battleground, that Hitler uses this narcotic, Eukodal, to put himself in a certain type of euphoric and convincing mood. And there are quite a few reports by generals coming out of those meetings saying, basically, when I went into the meeting, I was sure that we would have to convince the Führer about what is actually going on, but he was then so convincing because apparently he knows something that we all don't know. But basically what the generals didn't know was that Hitler was using something that made him able to be so convincing. This was a very brief overview of the topics that I've researched. It has quite a few more facets. I mean, just to briefly say, talk about this slide. For example, towards the end of the war, the German Navy developed mini submarines because all their big submarines had been sunk. And the idea was to have these mini submarines operational for up to a week underwater. They were manned usually by one person, very young people at the end of the war. And since the studies had shown that pervitin usually keeps you awake for 3 days and 3 nights, the Navy decided to develop a new drug, a wonder drug, as you might call it. And they tried different drug combinations and actually tested these in the concentration camp of Sachsenhausen on concentration camp inmates, letting them walk in circles with different drug combinations, then looking what drug makes you walk the longest, what gives you the highest endurance, and then using that for the young Navy soldiers. I thank you for your attention.